digital privacy, founded on the result of increased social activism in regards to government surveillance, especially in the online age. Technology and global communication has reached a steady rate of advancement with new forms of communicative devices and concepts being formed every day. Brandon discusses this and works through this with Project Digital Privacy. As such, it is in the best interest of both citizens of the United States and the world to keep it from becoming corrupted in any matter and to preserve the powerful and ever-evolving nature of these advancements. Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Keibler.
Hey, everybody. So, as you can already tell, my name's Brandon Keibler, and I'm really glad to be speaking before everybody today. So really, before I start into the heavy stuff, I'll go ahead and tell you all a little bit about myself. So I'm a 16-year-old, pretty normal teenager from Southern Indiana who enjoys, in the little spare time that I now have, paintball, ultimate frisbee, and just playing PlayStation with my friends. However, while looking normal on the outside, I co-founded a major privacy movement called Restore the Fourth at 14 years old, and recently founded Project Digital Privacy as well. My work with Restore the Fourth was featured on CNN, BBC, Fox, and other major news programs. I'm so glad to be able to speak here today, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm here today to speak about not only my activist career, but also about what gets young people, like myself, involved in activism, and why there aren't more young activists like me. So my speech is short and sweet, as I really wanted to focus on you all's questions as well. And with my speech, I bring three main points today. Now, I hope I can make an effect on everybody listening and inspire you to make change at home in your very own backyard. So I got my start to activism when I was about 14 years old. I remember the day I started. I was in Atlanta, Georgia on vacation, and instead of enjoying Atlanta like my sister and my family, I was stuck inside, joining the inside of an online chat room. I may have only been 14, but that didn't stop me from helping to found the biggest movement of protest since Occupy. Now that really brings me to my first point. Young people thinking others won't listen to them and take them seriously because they're young. Now, personally, I argue that young activists have the ability to make the most change. Whenever someone says to me, hey, no one's going to listen to me or care what I have to say because I'm young, I always like to remind them that America's founding fathers, so George Washington, Paul Revere, etc., were really only in their 20s, not the old men that we like to picture them as. I always like to remind them that Martin Luther King was a young man when he organized the civil rights movement, the Montgomery Bus. I always like to remind them that people like myself, 16, and Dan, 21, work to end tyranny every day, even though we are very young. I think the key to getting young people knowing others will care what they have to say is actually educating them. Now, what I mean by that is to be taken seriously in the activist community, you need to know what you're talking about. How this applies to my point is the fact that if you know what you're talking about, whether you're 14, 16, 21, 40, 100, people will listen to you. The difference in being able to make change, no matter what age of your subject, is knowledge. And I, knowing from personal experience, and definitely with Dan and Robbie and Bobby and everybody else that's listening, can say that anyone will listen to you as long as you know what you're talking about. Now, I want everybody that's listening to go ahead and think back to their childhood. So I'll let you do that for a second. Think back to when you were my age, when you were 16. Now, I want you to picture yourself standing in front of a building with a sign on Saturday. Or on Saturday night, instead of going out and watching a football game because varsity's playing the biggest team of the season, you're indoors making calls. Now, wouldn't you rather just stay inside, like or share something on Facebook, retweet something on Twitter, talk about change with your friends? Now, I want you to think about this because it's a problem we're facing. A problem that is my second point. Young people thinking internet action equals real action. Now, young people, they're not inclined lately to make change because, frankly, they have no reason to. Why go out and work 20 plus hours a week on an organization and become a change maker when liking something on Facebook or retweeting something will look the same to your peers? The laziness of young people has begun a downward spiral where there is all talk and no action. There's a culture change that needs to take place, and it starts with all of you here. The next time you think about liking something or retweeting something, think about whether or not it's just to fulfill your activist duties for the day, or whether or not it actually helps you make change. Now, my third point and final point consists of young people not having the courage to try and make change. So let's go ahead and go back again to when I began activism. At this point, I was a few weeks into Restore the Forest, and I had to take a few weeks off as I volunteered at camp that summer. Now, when I came back from camp, however, I felt a real interesting dilemma inside of me. It wasn't guilt, nor anger, nor jealousy, but it was uncertainty. I was uncertain I could help run an organization that got 15,000 people to protest in 3 weeks. I was uncertain that I would be taken seriously at the age of 14, where in a business that I worked at, where 30-year-olds from big cities, NYC, Los Angeles, etc., were working with me from across the nation. I was uncertain about what my friends at school would think about the fact that I was trying and succeeding to make a difference. But I did. I did all of those things, and everything turned out better than I could have imagined. Who would have thought that a year and a half later I would have my own organization and would be speaking to a group of America's next top activists? Who would have thought that my life would change forever because of a split second, what the heck, why not decision? I told you all my speech would be really short, so I'll leave you all with this today. If you're thinking about beginning your journey into activism, or you are a budding activist just like myself, please have the courage to begin right now. Begin today. Your 30 seconds of bravery and your decision will change the next 30 years of your life in wonderful ways I can't even imagine. So I thank you all. I know it was definitely shorter than probably a few other people's here. But yeah, I'm definitely glad to be able to speak, and I want to go ahead and start answering the questions.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate your presentation, and let's get right into some of the questions that we have. The first one is from Fiji in our chat wing. Do you have any tips for getting young people involved specifically in offline activism, such as sidewalk activism, as opposed to, say, making videos or other online activism?
You know, that's a really, really hard one because obviously, you know, with the demographic, you're going to have to, you know, focus on the online as that's where young people, you know, my age, that's where 90% of their time is going to be. But for tips, I mean, it really just goes back to the educating. I mean, you can reach out with things, you know, flyers. I mean, even just getting down, talking to them. I mean, they're real people too. I mean, it really just comes down to the education battle that you have to fight.
Second question. Oh, just a second, I just lost it. Let's see. What is one of the biggest challenges as a young person coming into activism?
I always like to make the analogy of me coming into activism that I came in as a blind dog and I came out as a three-legged one. But one of the really biggest challenges is, I mean, really, it wasn't being taken seriously. I mean, I know back with Restore the Forest, I mean, the reason that I left the organization was because of a dispute, really, because I was, I mean, the people there thought I was too young to lead it, actually. And, I mean, it really goes down is that you have to know your knowledge, and you have to know what you're talking about and know what you're doing to be taken seriously, and that's really the only way that you can fight something like that. But I really think that's been my biggest challenge so far.
From Jim Anderson in the chat wing, how did you get your message to national media outlets?
With Restore the Forest, they actually contacted us. So in the 3 weeks that we started up, we had gone from June 6th, and within 3 weeks, we'd gotten through a website called Reddit and through IRC chat rooms, we'd gotten about 20,000+ people into our community on Reddit. And through that, I guess our sphere of influence spread enough and our plans spread enough, just through grassroots activism and people sharing that they really took an interest in us. And then with our July the 4th protest, as they were quite big, I mean, 15,000 people, they decided to cover it. That was at least what I was told with it from our media people.
Fantastic. From SI advisor Alex Freeman, where are you planning on going to college, or are you planning on going to college?
I am actually, I am. So my father works at a U of L, University of Louisville. So with that, I can get a state college in Kentucky for free for the first 4 years. So I do plan, and then I do plan on going to University of Louisville. Hence the U of L shirt that I have on.
Fantastic. From in our chat wing, Ed Lee, what do you think motivates young people like yourself to get involved in fighting things like the NSA surveillance state?
Motivation, it really just comes down, at least with the young activists that I've personally talked to, they follow more of the same opinions as I do, in that they don't want to grow up in a world where, people can be kidnapped randomly off the street with indefinite detention, or, they're being groped in an airport by the TSA, or they're being spied upon in their houses. They don't want to grow up in a world like that. They don't want to raise kids in a world like that. So with the young activists that I've talked to, that's really been their main drive as well.
If someone wanted your support, what would be the ideal way to approach you as a young person?
Wanted my support? Probably just to talk to me, actually. Whenever someone has asked me, for their support on the thing, it's always good to start out with a phone call or at least an email, and you want to go ahead and you want to get that conversation flowing, and, you want to treat them, as you would anybody else. I mean, with any of the young activists I've talked to, and myself included, I mean, to get our support with these kind of things, it really does come down to, treating us like, not if we're older, but if, we're the same age as you. It just goes down to, I guess, just respecting us just as any other activist.
Yeah, and following up from what you were mentioning earlier with this restorative fourth and the pushback that you got from being younger, what are some of the things older activists can do to improve the way that they deal with young people in activism?
Ooh, that's a good one. I guess it really just goes down. I know a really big. I was interviewed last week by. I won't name the place just because I don't want to put anything on them. But I know that they talked about in the interview. They talked about how none of them had more modern things like cell phones or Twitter accounts, stuff like that. I think that really with older activists, if they can come down almost to stooping to our level and starting to begin to use the technology that's available to us more, the Twitter, Facebook, etc., to work with us. Excuse me, to work with us on fronts like that. I really think that you can get down to a level, of younger activists that way.
In a follow-up to that subject by Fiji in the chat wing, in your opinion, what are some respectful ways to target young people for education without seeming like we're old folks looking down on them?
Ooh, man. Can you repeat the question, actually?
Sure. In your opinion, what are some respectful ways to target young people for education without seeming like we're old folks looking down on them?
Young people. I really think that you just have to kind of include them into the main audience. I mean, obviously they're very different in what they like. So, I mean, maybe some different ways would be, like I said, going back to the technology thing, but not just using it, but learning how to use it effectively. I mean, I know with social media, I always like to at least try to make posts and make retweets every day. And, I always try to, put things up that I know that my viewers would enjoy, because, I mean, you want to go ahead and get down to the things that, they're interested in. And it really helps bring it home because that's where they're going to spend 90% of their time. So you want to get that part of their 90% of their time, and you want to know how to use it effectively.
From End Snow Code Corruption in the chat wing, how do we get political science back into schools? Apparently, it's no longer a required course, according to the question. How do we get the kids on board? How do we get the young people on board?
I know one of the things I've often thought about doing is going around and, helping to personally educate, kids my age. Because obviously we just need to get that discussion going. They're not going to have the discussion about change if they see no reason to make change. I mean, like I said in my speech, if they're sitting at home, in a really cushy couch with their cushy laptop in their hands, they're not going to say, hey, this isn't okay, and they're not going to do anything. So if you can educate them and make it down, make it really hit home for them and say, your brother, your sister, your mother, your aunt, everybody that you know is being affected by this, you can really begin to bring it home to them and, put the thought in their head. And if you have the thought in their head, it's going to catch fire and it's going to grow.
From BM Dulligan in the chat wing, what do you attribute your viral influence to?
Viral influence. I think, at least with Restore the Fourth, we really hit it at the right time. There was no niche in the market. I mean, we started on June 6, 2015, and I think the Snowden revelations came out on June 4th. So we really filled the niche in the market. So I think with really anybody starting up their organization, they need to find, a niche in the market that somebody not only isn't doing, but if they are doing, but they still want to try to do it, that they need to absolutely do it better than anybody else out there. So I think that's what I attribute ours to.
What are some of the platforms and outlets that you have used to engage in political action?
Oh, let me just look at my my bookmarks page. We have Donate Your Account, which is people can come to your Donate Your Account page and can put in their social media, and then you can automatically make posts on their social media for them to spread your influence. Tiny Letter, which is an email service, so they sign up for it and they get, an email update. I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of that. Facebook, Twitter, obviously email and phone are a huge one. As far as other things, I mean, you've got Reddit communities, subreddits. You've got Google Plus. I mean, if you want to go ahead and take a shot on that. Those have really been the main ones, and then IRC chat rooms as well. Internet relay chat.
This question is for me. So on the standpoint of young people activists and obviously getting them engaged, do you do either before did you do or will you do online conferences with young activists or with people who have questions so they can get them involved? For example, as a parent, I have a 16-year-old, would love to him to talk to people his age because of the disconnect with the older, younger political activism stuff, learning how people are involved. Do you do anything like that?
As far as this has been the first conference that I've done, but I mean, it's one of my goals in the future to work with kids my age. To me, that's a huge issue is, educating, people my age about how, things like this aren't right and that there are things you can do as, 16, 15, 14-year-old that, will actually make a difference. And, it's not just a like on Facebook and call it a day. But I mean, obviously, I'd love to do, more things like this in the future.
When it comes to young activists, and actually any activists of any age, how much do you have to, or do you see you getting through distraction stuff, videos and sports and reality TV? How much does that come into play with the activists that you speak about?
It's huge, to be honest. I mean, even with myself, I've got, a rack full of movies and a PlayStation 4 sitting 10 feet away from me that if I wanted to drop this call and go play right now, I could. But I mean, it really takes a level of, I don't know, I would say, what is the word? Discretion against using it, maybe? Self-control, probably, which, I mean, it's a huge thing to judge. And I think that, that's a real big turning point for some people is that they can't, just sit around and play video games all day, that they actually have to put the work in.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Oh, I appreciate your presentation, Brandon. Wonderful interaction. I'm sure everybody else appreciates it. Again, if you guys want to put any more questions in for Brandon, chat wing, we're going to be closing it up here and moving on to our next speaker. Remember, we have intermission videos in between the speakers. We also will be having an intermission of the conference coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern time, where we'll be taking a break and be picking it right back up with our next speaker at 4 o'clock. That'll be coming up soon as a reminder. Are there any more questions for Brandon? Please.
I think we have one in the chat wing.
We do.
I'm looking at it right now, yeah.
As a younger activist, do you find yourself concerned about the potential for arrest or abuse by police or the long-term consequences thereof that tend to affect your decisions about doing offline activism? And a follow-up to that, are there things you would like to see older activists doing to help address those concerns? This is from Fija in our chat wing.
To be honest, yes, I'm very worried about that. I mean, obviously, we saw with Dan where I think it was 2011 or 2012. I mean, he got sent, child porn. So, I mean, obviously, I'm very worried about, something like that happening, or, I mean, definitely, because, I mean, there's no doubt that I'm not on a watch list somewhere at this point. But I guess it really just, I have to really be careful with it. And we all do. I mean, it's something to worry about at this point. And as much as we may not like that we have to worry about it, we do. Long-term consequences. Other things address these concerns. As far as older activists, I think, it address those concerns, because that's really a hard one to answer, because I mean, obviously it wouldn't, I don't know exactly how much older activists would have, as far as a sphere of influence, with the difference between me being arrested, for doing God knows whatever they accuse me of, or, saying, being sent child porn like Dan was, or what have you. But I can't really think of a thing that they could help do to address those concerns, to be honest.
What about teaching you to address that? For example, teaching the younger as our responsibilities. What is it that you'd like to hear us telling you about, and when those interactions happen? Assuming that some of this is done in person, protesting things or the like, as well as online attacks, like you mentioned with Dan. So of course I'm aware of that as well.
I mean, really, any sort of advice is great. I know I've gotten, plenty of advice from people like you or Ed Lee or Dan, activists at least older than myself who have, far more experience and know, a ton of tips and tricks and ways to do things that I wouldn't have ever thought of. So, I'm really thinking, I know, for example, I'll just use Dan because he's, an older activist than myself. And whenever he was, whenever we were working on launching, I mean, he knew exactly what websites to go to do things like host PDFs, or, how to send out email updates. So I think sharing those, small tips and tricks that, you normally wouldn't have thought of as a younger activist, but that the older ones would know about would be, the best thing.
Fantastic. And last but not least, we got Alex Freeman, RSI advisor, has a question here, and we'll follow up. Give me about a minute on your answer, please. Do you find a difference in respect or treatment from older activists than older business leaders, teachers, parents, etc., that are not necessarily activists?
Yes, actually. I really think that, whenever I meet, an older activist than myself, that as long as I can, say, hey, I'm a legit guy, I'm not just, here to mess around, that they do treat me with a certain respect. Whereas, I mean, to be honest, with things like teachers or, business leaders like that, it kind of comes down where they treat everybody with the same, kind of attitude, at least. But I really think that there's a respect difference.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brandon Keibler, for your presentation and your time and answering the questions that our viewers have put forth to you. You be well, and we'll be seeing you around the activist world.
All righty. Thank you all for having me.
And now we'll move to our next